meeting. And John, take it away.
Okay, I call the Tuesday, November 16th, 2021 meeting of the Oshkosh Plan Commission to order. And could we please take the roll?
Sorry, it wasn't turning on. Mr. Coulibaly?
Aye. Present.
Miss Davy?
Here.
Councilmember Ford?
Here.
Mr. Marshall? Mr. Kiefer? Mr. Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Perry?
Present.
Miss Shireman?
Present.
Mr. Spanbauer? Miss Prop? Mr. Hins?
Present.
And John, just one note for the record, as you did hear, we do have a new member on Plan Commission. Mr. Marshall was appointed from alternate to full board member, and Brad Spanbauer, who works over at the university and is also on our Sustainability Advisory Board, has been appointed to Plan Commission in one of our alternate seats.
Thank you, Mark, and congratulations to both of you. Before we approve the minutes here, just go do a little housekeeping. For those people who have never been here for our Plan Commission meetings, I will introduce the item by title. I will turn it over to staff and they will do a summary and presentation on the issue. Then it will come back to the Plan Commission for technical questions. After the technical questions are taken care of by the Plan Commission, I'll open it up to public comment and statements from the applicant. And after we close public comment, it'll come back to the Plan Commission for a motion and more discussion, and then we'll take a vote on it. And as Mark had said at the beginning of the meeting, anybody who wants to speak during this meeting, when we do get into the public comment session, just you can use the raise your hand, and I know all the people that are on the commission know how to use the raise hand gesture, so we won't go into that anymore. Now I'll accept a motion and second for approval of the November 2nd meeting minutes.
Approve the minute.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Can we call the roll, please?
Mr. Coulibaly?
Aye.
Miss Davy?
Aye.
Councilmember Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell?
Present.
Mr. Perry?
Aye.
Miss Shireman?
Aye.
Miss Prop?
Aye.
Chairperson Hins?
Aye. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item number 1. It's accepting street right-of-way dedication for a cul-de-sac at the western terminus of Wilson Avenue. Do we have any site inspections? Just raise your hand if you did. Not seeing anyone for this one. Okay, we accept the staff report as part of the record, and I turn it over to whoever is presenting this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The city is requesting the acceptance of right-of-way of 2 segments at the easterly terminus of Wilson Avenue to complete a cul-de-sac bulb. Earlier this year, a portion of Wilson Avenue was vacated between Algoma Boulevard and the western paved surface of Wilson Avenue. Part of the vacation is requiring to dedicate a cul-de-sac bulb to be code compliant, which will allow for turnaround area for large vehicles. The proposed cul-de-sac is proposed to be 37.5 feet in diameter, which is typically smaller than a 50-foot cul-de-sacs typically requested. However, the Department of Public Works reviewed this request, and they're comfortable that the cul-de-sac bulb is sized adequately for paving enough area for a vehicle turnaround. The first dedication on the north side is 484 square feet semicircle, which ties into the curve to the west. And then similarly, on the south side is another 484 square foot semicircle dedication, which mirrors the dedication to the north. The dedications are included on a draft certified survey map, which is currently under review by staff. And the owners of both properties are aware and agreeable to the dedications to the public. Once the city staff approves the CSM, will be recorded at the Register of Deeds, and the dedications will become official upon Common Council approval. With that, staff is recommending approval of the acceptance of the right-of-way as requested.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Do we have any technical questions from the Planning Commission? I see Mr. Ford, go ahead.
Yeah, are there any plans currently to develop that cul-de-sac, make improvements or anything?
Yes, eventually it will be required to be paved, as Justin Gurak.
Yep, I'm here. So as part of the development, once the subject site to the north develops, they will install the public cul-de-sac and any inlets that are associated with it.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Because this is a smaller round of a cul-de-sac than usual, is there going to be parking restrictions once it's developed?
That has not come up yet. Justin?
Sorry, I didn't catch that question. What was that again?
Since this is a smaller cul-de-sac than normal at 37.5 feet rather than 50 feet, are there going to be any parking restrictions when it's developed? Because if people are parked along there, then the purpose of the cul-de-sac and turning around is not valid.
Yeah, that's something I would have to work with transportation director on. I haven't thought that far ahead, but could conceivably say yes, there more than likely would be parking restrictions, as you indicated. That does kind of defeat the purpose of having it and what it would be used for.
Okay, any other technical questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. We will open it up now to public comment. Is there anybody here from the public who would like to speak to this item? I don't know if I need to call the city of Oshkosh up to make a statement or not.
Do not see anyone.
Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. So I will close the public comment section and bring it back to the commission for a motion in a second.
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report. Kathy?
Mitchell, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Does anybody have any discussion on this item? Not seeing any. Let's call the roll.
Mr. Coulibaly,
Aye.
Miss Davy,
Aye.
Councilmember Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell.
Aye.
Mr. Perry,
Aye.
Miss Shireman,
Aye.
Miss Prop,
Aye.
Chairperson Hins.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-0.
Okay, thank you. Move on to item number 2, public hearing. Zone change from institutional district, I, and single family residential 5 district, SR5, to institutional district with a planned development overlay, IPD, and approval of a general development plan and specific implementation plan for property located at 805 Whitsel Avenue. Did we have any site inspections for this one?
Looks like Mr. Hintz and Miss Davy.
Okay. And we will accept the staff report as part of the record. Now I'll turn it over to city staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the subject area consists of 4 parcels located at the southwest corner of Whitsel Avenue and Idaho Street. The parcels consist of the existing Parks Facility building, 2 vacant city-owned properties, and a residential property. The applicant is requesting a zone change to have all 4 parcels zoned institutional district with a planned development overlay to provide consistent zoning for all parcels, which will allow those lots to be combined. And the PD overlay then will allow for some flexibility to the zoning ordinance requirements to accommodate some issues with meeting site requirements. So the applicant is proposing to demolish the existing Parks Facility building and build a new Parks Facility, which will include areas for vehicle storage, wash bays, shops, and offices. The existing Parks Facility site will be combined with 2 vacant parcels, as well as the existing residential property immediately to the south, with those existing residential structures being demolished. So here's the site plan. The development will have 3 driveway entrances off of Idaho Street for access to 2 parking areas and to an overhead door fronting Idaho Street. The parking area on the south and west sides of the building will also be utilized for vehicle material storage and will be fully enclosed with fencing and a gate for access. A BSM will be needed for the outdoor storage, as that is not an allowable use within the institutional district. And it will also need a BSM for the 8-foot tall solid fencing. Its maximum height is 6 feet in the institutional district. So staff is supportive of the BSM for the outdoor storage area and the 8-foot tall solid fencing, as that will be compatible with the existing city facilities to the east and will also be a significant distance from the neighboring residential properties to the south. Provided parking for the site is slightly over the maximum of 1 space per employee on the largest work shift. They're providing 61 where the maximum is 59. According to the applicant, the facility will have 27 employees and have approximately 20 seasonal employees, and also expect additional employees in the future and anticipates visitors to the site from the public. So staff is supportive of a BSM to allow that additional parking to meet those needs. The applicant is requesting reduced side setback on the west side of the property for the proposed building and parking area. And that reduced setback is needed to accommodate development within that narrow northern portion of the parcel and still meet setbacks from the Idaho Street frontage. So staff is supportive of that BSM, as the narrow width of the northern portion of the lot restricts that ability to meet those setbacks, and it will still be consistent with the neighboring properties along Whitsel for that reduced setback, as that setback would be permitted within the UMU zoning district, which is kind of the surrounding zoning of that property. The applicant has recently submitted an updated landscape plan, which requests a BSM for reduced setback for a generator and transformer from the Idaho Street frontage to 11 feet, where code requires a 25-foot setback. Staff is supportive of that BSM for the generator and transformer, provided they screen it with medium evergreen trees, as shown on the landscape plan. The landscaping plan is meeting building foundation landscaping requirements, also meeting paved area requirements, with the exception of the provided shrub landscaping points being slightly under the minimum, and that can be addressed during site plan review. For street frontage landscaping, they are not providing the minimum 50% medium trees along those street frontages. And again, that can be addressed as part of the site plan review process. They can swap out some landscaping for medium trees along those frontages. They are exceeding the total point requirement for yards, and for buffer yards along the south, east, and west, where it's abutting residential zoning. The applicant is providing 8-foot tall solid fencing along with landscaping points. However, they will need to add some more landscaping points to meet those buffer yard requirements, and also need to swap out some of those deciduous trees they're showing with evergreen trees, as buffer yard points need to be evergreen tree type landscaping. For signage, they're showing a monument sign with an electronic message center along the northeast corner of the property. They will need a BSM for the sign placement, as the sign will have a 17-foot 3-inch setback from Whitsel Avenue. That reduced setback, as it will allow for some increased visibility from Whitsel Avenue and Idaho Street, and will also be further back than the existing sign, and it will be consistent with reduced setbacks for ground signs for neighboring commercial properties along Whitsel Avenue. As far as site lighting, they are meeting the 0.4 foot candle lighting level for all parking areas and not exceeding 0.5 foot candles at the property lines per code, with the exception of areas along Idaho Street where they're showing 0.6 to 1.0 foot candles. So they would need a BSM for that increase, and staff is supportive of that BSM as that will only be going into the public right of way and slightly over the maximum. For building exteriors, the zoning ordinance does not have institutional requirements for design standards. However, as it being part of a plan development, we do review that part of it. So the proposed building elevations consist of a combination of architectural precast, brick, and glass. The predominant material will be the architectural precast, and staff feels that the use of that material as the predominant exterior material is appropriate, as the building will be primarily used for utility purposes. And will also be a similar appearance to the recently built public works facility immediately to the east. And elevations were presented to Plan Commission at a workshop in July of this year, and Plan Commission voiced support for those proposed building design. So with that, staff recommends approval of the rezone, GDP, and SIP with the findings and conditions in your staff report, and the additional conditions to allow BSM for reduced street side setback for the generator and transformer, and also a condition that a minimum of 100 evergreen tree landscaping points be provided to screen the generator and transformer.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Now we'll come to the Plan Commission. Any technical questions? Okay, Mr. Ford, go ahead.
Yeah, so the just to clarify, the building material in the report, it says the exterior design standards don't apply to institutional land uses. So right, those percentages you're giving to us, it's because we're allowed to review them, but they don't necessarily have to meet any specifics.
Correct. Per code, they would not need to meet them, but for institutional uses, we often kind of refer to a similar land use requirement for exterior materials. In this case, we compared it to commercial design standards.
Okay, thank you.
As Brian said, as we've tried to hold city buildings to a standard similar to the rest of the community, we want to at least make sure you're aware of what the building materials are, even though there are no minimum standards.
Okay, it looks like Mr. Mitchell has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you. When we had a workshop on this project, we had talked about exploring possible ways to utilize the landscaping as a learning opportunity, demonstration area, something that would demonstrate, this is clearly a parks department building and not just, a street sanitation building or other. Have there been any sort of, developments or progress in that area, or is it, which is not to negatively speak on the city's standard requirements, but did we do anything special or unique that would demonstrate kind of that leadership in sustainability or park space and whatnot?
I would defer that to the Parks Department, and his representatives can answer if they were able to take that into account. We have no way of requiring it through the plan development, but they can speak to, I remember those specifically comments, and see if they were able to incorporate anything.
Yeah, John Wallenkamp. Oh,
go ahead, John.
Ray.
I'm sorry. This is Ray.
You can start, Ray.
Okay. I'm here on the behalf of the Parks Department and John Wallenkamp on Cooney Architects. We did present this design and concept to the Sustainability Advisory Board, and some of that discussion did come up. And if you take a look on the east side of the building, there is a bioswale right where the cursor is right now. And what we talked about doing there is having some educational signage as people exit the parking lot to come into our building, to have some signage there as far as the plantings, what the benefit of the bioswale, and some of that information as part of our project. John, anything else?
Nope, that's what I was going to speak upon.
If I can continue, thank you for that, Ray.
Sure.
Does the city still have the residential property tax incentive for on-site stormwater management, where if you have rain barrels and you have your gardens and whatnot, that you can have that credit applied? I guess
Mr.
I'd
Chairman.
ask back to Mark Lyons.
Yeah, Department of Public Works does take stormwater credit applications, both not only for residential properties, but as well as public buildings such as this. I know the DPW field operations garage does have credits, I believe, for their facilities on site. So it is something that the city does look at.
Awesome. So the follow-up then is, I don't know how many visitors you're going to have at this particular site, but in addition to just having something that people that are walking by may see, it would be great to bring in Oshkosh Media and whatever other entities to be able to document this and share that information online, and maybe even have that next to where people might apply or research the application for that credit, so that they can see hopefully one of the best possible examples of how it's done and how it's done right.
Yeah, I'm happy to coordinate with Oshkosh Media and Ray and his folks. Maybe see if once this is constructed, we can do a little piece on it.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else to speak on this that wants to speak on this or has any questions on this item? Not okay. Margie, go ahead.
There we go, unmute. Have we moved into the portion of the meeting now where we're asking questions of the applicant? I know because it's the city, it's kind of a gray area. So I can keep asking questions.
Let's finish up technical questions for city staff for the planning department, and then we'll get into the quote unquote applicant with Mr. Mauer and his group.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else? Not seeing anyone. I just had one quick question, and it was kind of along the lines of what Justin was asking about. I see that we're 700 points below what's required, and being that it is the Parks Department, is there is there a reason other than that one narrow side or something like that we have such a significant amount below what's required?
So staff is not recommending we grant them any base standards for landscaping, and that between this point today, if council would approve the project, they will have to add those points prior to site plan review.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I just wanted to, I wasn't sure that I heard it that way, so I wanted to make sure that I was clear on that. Any other technical questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Let's move it to the public hearing section. And I guess we can request a statement from the Parks Department on this. Seeing as we've had then
Mr. Mauer or Mr. Wallenkamp have any additional comments for us?
Yeah.
I really don't, John, unless you've got something else to add.
I do not accept that anything that's required by the city, like shortage of these points, we guarantee we'll get them worked out before we move forward, and value any opinions and feedback from the commission.
Okay, now I guess this would be where Margie, there you go. Go ahead.
Okay,
Margie.
thank you. I know we discussed this at sustainability with John and Ray, but I just wanted to ask again, are there any plans for showcasing some of the different types of trees that we wish people would grow in Oshkosh, given that this is the forestry department as well as the parks department? And I don't know, I guess, what you're planning to do with the rest of the green area shown on the map that's on the screen. That is, let me think, I think it's east of the bioswale there. Yeah, that area. It seems to me that that would be a very nice place, if you have no other plans for it immediately, to showcase a lot of different types of trees. I know that people are having to take down a lot of ash trees, for example. We lost a lot of oaks previously. I'm not sure people know what other trees look like. And which ones they might want to plant. Has that been taken into consideration?
I can speak for the, that landlocked parcel that you were just speaking of. That's a parcel that, we acquired, I think about 8 years ago. And what we intend and what we'll be planning for there is using that as a nursery stock area for some of our street trees that will be going out and being planted. So it is usable space for us that the forestry department will have, some of their trees that we'll be using then in the parks as well as in the terrace areas.
Okay, so it would sort of answer that question, right? I
And then
also
that,
see,
oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, the, was that you, John? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say we also did work with Bill with the forestry to come up with the trees and the species they wanted to see around this site. And then, kind of answering your question, we did work with staff to make sure the trees that were part of the landscape plan did meet what they're looking to see, not only here, but eventually throughout the city.
Okay, thank you for that. I also saw that the planning board is, the planning department is recommending, I believe I saw when I read it, more evergreens and less other kinds of trees. I understand that they're denser and provide a barrier all year round, but I'm wondering if there could be a lot of variety there too that might be helpful for the public to, I could sort of see, and maybe you don't want people out there looking at stuff, but I could sort of see this being a showcase area for that too.
I don't know, Mark, can you speak for where the evergreens? I thought that was possibly for some screening of the generators and so forth. Is that part
So
of it?
evergreen plantings are required for a few instances out here. And Plan Commission could choose to add a baseline modification on if they don't want to see the evergreens. One of them is the locations of the generator and the utilities here on the east side. The other piece of it is our buffer yard landscaping requirements do require that, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong here, but 50% of the plantings have to be of the evergreen variety.
Actually, all of the
All of them.
landscaping needs to be evergreen to meet for the buffer yard points. 50% needs to be on the exterior of the fencing, which it is in this case, but it's not all being evergreen. So it would need a BSM to allow the points being met with deciduous trees.
So to your point then, Margie, if we did not want those to all be evergreens adjacent to the residential properties, you would have to add a baseline modification. Otherwise, base code is going to require that buffer yard landscaping adjacent to single family residential include those evergreen plantings.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go back for reference to the zoning map just so we can kind of see where those areas may potentially be. So it would be the west, south, and east is where those buffer yard requirements apply.
Okay, anybody else with technical or with questions for the petitioners? Okay, not seeing anyone. Is there anybody else from the public who would like to speak on this item? Not seeing anyone. At this point, we'll close the public hearing, and either Ray or John, did either one of you want to make any closing statements?
Nope. Thanks for everyone's input.
No, I think this was helpful.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the commission then for a motion in a second and then discussion.
Mitchell make a motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in staff report.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion? I see Justin, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Two things quick. Mr. Mauer indicated that the sustainability board had taken a look at this and maybe raised some important questions. It gets back to one of those things that I brought up before with what we're presented. Timing doesn't always work, and I understand that you have to give sufficient notice, and that might have been the case here. But just I wanted to share a reminder if there were other committees that provided important information, that reviewed a plan that we're looking at, in specifically something as close as the Sustainability Board, which is oftentimes looking at things in a very similar nature to the Plan Commission. It would be great to have those records as part of something that we're looking at and considering. But that said, I'm really excited that the city is moving forward with an updated, attractive, and usable space for the Parks Department. I think oftentimes in the spirit of trying to save money, there's a celebration of non-investment in our public infrastructure. I think that this development demonstrates a pride in our community and care for what we do and what we look like when we're doing it. So I commend the city and everybody involved for getting it this far, and I look forward to seeing this come to realization.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Anybody else have any comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I guess we will call the roll.
Mr. Coulibaly,
Aye.
Miss Davy,
Aye.
Councilmember Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Perry,
Aye.
Miss Shireman,
Aye.
Miss Prop,
Aye.
Chairperson Hins.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-0.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our last agenda item here. It's a public hearing. Zone change from institutional district and single-family residential 9 district to institutional district with a plan development overlay and approval of a general development plan and specific implementation plan for property located at southeast corner of Jackson Street and West Nevada Avenue. And I'd also like to add, before we get into any of this, we're discussing zone change on this item. And we're not discussing anything, and for anybody who's here from the public, we will not be allowing discussion about any potential referendums or rehab or rebuild of the property. We're sticking to what we have on our agenda. So with that said, were there any site inspections?
Looks like Mr. Hintz, Miss Davy, Miss Prop, Mr. Ford, Miss Shireman, Mr. Perry.
Everybody?
All right, thank you. Just getting them all for the record, make sure we get it right.
Okay. We have everybody. We accept the staff report as part of the record, and I will turn it over to City.
Thank you. So the subject area consists of 2 existing properties owned and utilized by the school district, as well as 5 existing residential and vacant properties with frontage on Jackson Street, West Nevada Avenue, and Kentucky Street. The surrounding area is primarily residential uses, along with the existing Merrill Middle School site to the east. So the applicant is requesting a zone change for all 7 parcels to be rezoned to institutional district with a plan development overlay to provide consistent zoning for all parcels, which will allow those lots to be combined. And again, that'll also provide the flexibility from the zoning ordinance requirements by allowing the plan development overlay to accommodate some site constraints. The applicant is proposing to combine the subject parcels for development of a new middle school, which will combine the existing Merrill Middle School and Webster Stanley Middle School. The site was chosen for the new middle school through a referendum that was passed in November of 2020. A Plan Commission workshop was held in September of 2021 with the Plan Commission voicing support for the plans. A neighborhood meeting was also held in September of 2021 with neighbors voicing some concerns related to pickup and drop off of students, bicycle access, location of loading area along Jackson Street, and appearance of the site. The site design includes 4 driveway accesses off of Kentucky Street to 2 parking areas, as well as 1 access off of Jackson Street to a loading area that will be used for deliveries only. The plans include flipping the one-way pairs of Kentucky Street and Central Street. Reversal of one-way traffic flow for these 2 streets was approved by Common Council on November 9th of this year. Here's the site plan. They're providing 147 parking spaces, which meets the code requirement. They're also providing 116 bicycle spaces for students and employees. Total impervious surface area for the site is over the maximum of 60% for the institutional district. They're proposing 66% of the lot be impervious. The increased impervious surface area is needed to provide the needed building and parking areas on the site without further increasing the building height. So staff feels that that increased impervious surface is an appropriate alternative to increasing the building height, as that would be more compatible with the surrounding residential neighborhood. Proposed building height will exceed the maximum height by 3 feet to accommodate 3-story building height, and by 15 feet to accommodate mezzanine features. According to the applicant, the maximum 45-foot tall building is not achievable for a 3-story building due to current HVAC, structural, and architectural design requirements. The site plan includes a masonry dumpster enclosure at the northwest portion of the site by the loading area between the building and the Jackson Street right-of-way. So that would require a BSM, and staff feels that the proposed location of the dumpster enclosure is appropriate, as it's alongside the loading area, which will be most functional for the site. Staff is recommending a condition that a minimum of 40 evergreen tree landscaping points be provided in front of that dumpster enclosure to break up the view from Jackson Street. The site is meeting all applicable setbacks with the exception of street side setbacks for parking and drive areas along Jackson Street and Kentucky Street. Staff is supportive of the reduced pavement setback for the drive areas, as it is needed to accommodate access and parking, and as well as loading areas for the site. Also, there's site constraints relating to having 3 frontages. As far as landscaping, they are meeting building foundation landscaping point requirements. They're also meeting paved area requirements, with the exception of missing 1 overstory tree required for the parking lots, and that can be addressed during the site plan review process. For street frontage landscaping, they're requesting BSMs for reduced street frontage landscaping along Jackson Street and Kentucky Street frontages. So according to the applicant, the need for underground stormwater detention tank system and a bio basin limit the available area to provide those plantings along those street frontages. So the applicant has provided additional building foundation and paved area landscaping over the code minimum to offset the reduced street frontage landscaping. The applicant has not included yard landscaping points. However, due to the uniquely large floor area of a school and limited available yard areas, staff is recommending that the yard landscaping point be waived. And to offset that, the combined total of all other landscaping categories is exceeding the minimum requirement by 1,000 points. So that will serve to offset the reduced yard landscaping points. For buffer yards, they are meeting the buffer yard requirement for those areas that are abutting a single family zoning. For signage, they are proposing a 6-foot, 10-inch tall, 40 square foot monument sign, which will include an electronic message center along the Kentucky Street frontage. They will need a BSM for the required sign placement, as is within the Kentucky Street front setback area. And it will also be within the required 100-foot separation from residentially zoned parcels. So staff is supportive of the reduced setback to about 19 feet, as it will match the setback of the drive aisle immediately to the south. Also, there are site constraints again. It does not appear feasible to move the sign any further to the interior of the site. So again, staff is supportive of that reduced setback for that sign. For site lighting, the minimum lighting level is being met for all parking and drive areas, with the exception of the loading area on the northwest corner of the site. So staff is supportive of a BSM to allow that decreased lighting level, as that area will be utilized for loading only and not for parking. For building design, this also is a institutional land use, which code does not have exterior design standards for. However, being part of a plan development, we do review that. So the proposed building elevations consist of a combination of stone, brick, glass, and metal panels. The proposed elevations significantly exceed the minimum of 50% Class 1 materials, as it would compare to a commercial use. So they're kind of going above and beyond Class 1 material requirements of comparable building requirements. So staff feels that the proposed elevations provide an attractive appearance for the building, and the significant proportion of Class 1 materials serves to offset the requested BSMs. So staff is recommending a condition also that the rooftop mechanical equipment be screened from view. With that, staff recommends approval of the rezone, GDP, and SIP with the findings and conditions in your staff report.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Come to the Plan Commission for technical questions. Okay, see Margie, go ahead.
Can you just point out again, Brian, where the reduced lighting is? I'm not clear which side of the building that's on. Is that like off of Jackson where no, it's off of Kentucky?
Correct, it'd be off of Jackson Street and the northern portion of that loading area that's accessed off of Jackson Street. Kind of in blue there where Mark's pointing.
Okay, thank you. I'm cool with that.
And then I see Ms. Shireman, John.
That actually was my question too, and I'm not sure if I'm going to ask my question, but I don't know if it's technical or not. Is technical just clarifying that? Because my question is, why would we allow reduced lighting in a loading area? So is this not the right time to ask it?
Nope, this would be the right time.
Okay.
It's really the layout of the area when we evaluated it. When they went from 2 access points to a single access point, they essentially have to have some backup room to get back out onto the street. Code only allows you to enter and exit in a forward motion. So that area is largely unused. It's just there for the occasional time when a vehicle needs to use it for maneuvering. The majority of the actual unloading and kind of drop off for the materials and the trash container on the southern part of the site that is fully lit. So we felt that in this instance, it was a reasonable compromise with the limited use of that area.
There's no other positioning of lights. I mean, there's only one kind of lighting that can go there. It just conceptually seems like, why would we want to have less lighting in a loading area? Even secondarily, it just sounds.
We really look at it as the limited capacity and the limited use. We could definitely require them to up that to code minimums.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see Justin, go ahead.
Thank you. It sometimes pains me when we start a topic and we add commentary that in a way can be interpreted as we're only looking at this small microscopic picture, not the macro idea, but yet we are the Plan Commission, and one of the functions of a Plan Commission, no surprise, is planning. And one of the things I struggle with where we're at with the school district in this development is that we're only seeing a small portion of what the plan may be for all of the sites, and in particular, what is the plan for the other site where the school currently sits? And I know that's not on the discussion, but what I fear is that we get far along on this development, and then the school district comes back and says, well, you approved all of that, and now we don't have enough space. And so this is our only alternative option for the other plot of land, which includes potentially demolishing a historically significant building. I look all over their website. I looked through records, and that word demolish Merrill or demo Merrill doesn't appear anywhere. And I just feel like we're moving forward further and further and further along a full plan with only seeing a limited scope of it. And I think that if we do move forward on this particular proposal today, that we need to have some sort of come together or some sort of session where we see the full picture of what they're looking at, what they've considered, what's been offered to them regarding open space, park space, that sort of thing, so that we're not just piecemealing this all together.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments. Planning Commission does have a definitive role in this as staff when we evaluate this. The other side, whether it is green space or looks at potential housing from our perspective, doesn't change the fact that what we're evaluating on this site is this appropriate development for this site. I appreciate the comments and the feedbacks and understanding what they may do that site in the future, but from our perspective, the land use and the decisions made for this site are separate from that.
I just go back to the whole notion of when we transitioned from the golf course. If we would have said, we're not going to look at a full picture of it all. We're just going to look at, yes, they want a gas station there, so we're only going to look at that gas station and not see how it flows with the potential other future developments, not look at how it impacts anything else. We would not have been doing our job, nor would have the department. And we didn't. We were pretty comprehensive on that. There was a full plan that included the Parks Department, included Oshkosh Corporation. This seems to be that sort of thing as well, when we're talking about 2 city blocks and completely transforming the use. To only do it in piecemeal because that's what's in front of us today is short-sighted, and I think we can do better. And I think that the school district, given that it's public land, owes that to the community to have a broader look at what their plans are, so that we don't go down this rabbit hole, have all of these developments in place, and then say, well, it's too late to go back on that, so now we only have this option with the other lot.
Appreciate the feedback.
Okay, anyone else from the Plan Commission with technical questions? Okay, not seeing any, so we will open up the public hearing part of this, and I guess will we be asking the school district to speak at this point, Mark?
Either Mr. Constantine from Bray, I believe, is here.
Okay, so if the petitioner or the representative for the petitioners would like to make any statements right now, this would be the time.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted to comment on a couple of the comments made this evening. One regarding the lighting over off of Jackson Street. It was very apparent to us in the neighborhood meeting that the existing neighbors, whether immediately adjacent to our site or across the street from our site, were respected from a visibility perspective, whether that's light levels, whether that's aesthetics, whether that's fencing, whatever that might be. That they had some input that we simply wanted to honor. So not lighting that very specific corner was very intentional, because we felt that as that is a deliveries only area, most of the deliveries, if not all of them, would happen between, let's say, 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. while the natural light would be available. Obviously, in the wintertime, it gets a little close on the tail end and the start of those time periods, but that most deliveries would happen while it's light outside. And obviously, as mentioned, the primary delivery area is well lit throughout the evening. So just a note there that was an aesthetic choice and a respect to the neighborhood choice to not light up that corner that will be very, very prominent on the Jackson Street corridor. Basically, I guess, unnecessarily to a degree from aesthetics as well as respect to our neighbors. We do understand why the code requirement is what it is, but given the use of that space, it didn't feel necessary to light that. The second piece, I do respect just the comments regarding the development or what the site will be across the street. I have no reason to disagree with your research on the school district's website regarding what will come of the existing Merrill site. Just a comment, I mean, this is nothing official as there's been no direct decision made. But if you look back at referendum documents, that area had been shown as a green space. I think the school district still thinks about it that way, but its future is still to be determined. And I imagine that Plan Commission will be a part of that process. As you're right, that is a existing historic building to the neighborhood. Maybe not designated per se, but to this neighborhood, that's a very significant building. So as we designed this building, it was very cognizant of what may be lost in the process, and we wanted to play homage to that. So although we don't know the full-fledged answers to what that site will be, we look forward to continuing the dialogue, not only from Bray Architects' perspective, but on behalf of Oshkosh Area School District.
Okay, thank you very much. Did anyone from the Plan Commission have any questions for the developer? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Is there anybody else here from the public that would like to speak to this item?
Yes, my name is Don Kelmerton. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yep, I can hear you. Just state your name and address, please.
Okay. My name is Donald Kelmerton. I'm at 1310 Jackson Street. That is the residential property that will be surrounded by the new facility if it's built. To begin with, I would like to commend Justin Mitchell's comment about not going forward with this until you have all of the information. I personally have attended meetings and have not yet received any straight answers to my questions. I do not know that anyone fully understands what's involved here, other than perhaps a few people at the school district. The neighborhood, to the best of my knowledge, and all of the people that I chat with, are not happy with things the way they are. None of the property owners that are directly abut the proposed construction site are happy with the design or how it's laid out. The variance that the school district has asked for the building as is designed really shouldn't be approved. If you're trying to put in a building of this size into a residential area, it should be able to conform and blend in with the neighborhood. It doesn't. It's going to be a sore thumb. I strongly urge the Planning Commission to reject this application until a full, and I mean a complete full plan of what is going to happen with the property is put before the Planning Commission, and the citizens of Oshkosh and the voters of the Oshkosh School District can vote on it actually and review it. Right now, I see very few people who fully understand or know about the entire plan. So again, with all due respect, but I strongly urge the Planning Commission to reject the application until a full plan is put before the commission regarding both pieces of the property. And I would like to see the building, if it goes forward as it is, I would like to see the building conform with zoning. And I would like to see the setbacks maintained as the code requires. And I'd like to see the setbacks even increased from 10 to 10 feet per story of construction. Based on the foot traffic and vehicle traffic on Jackson Street, that this will affect and probably increase. The way the current design is, I believe it will not function as you have it designed. I have asked for somebody to talk with about this, and as of now, I still don't know who to talk to about this matter. So again, I strongly ask that the Planning Commission reject this until you get a full plan about everything. And if anybody has any comments for me about who to talk with, I would greatly appreciate this, because I've attended several meetings, and the impression that the zoning commission has here about the neighborhood accepting this or liking this is totally false. Everyone I talk to, every meeting I go to, this building, this project is wholeheartedly rejected. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here from the public to speak on this item?
Can I have a follow-up question for Donald? This is Justin.
Yes.
Is that all right, John?
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mark, is
Yep, perfectly fine.
okay.
Really quick, wanted to ask if those meetings that you attended were public official meetings that the school district had set up or the city had set up. What were those meetings you're talking about?
To the best of my knowledge, these were neighborhood meetings by the neighborhood association, and the school board set up the meeting at Merrill School. I did not attend this meeting that they had at the other middle school on the other side of town near the administration building. I didn't know about that meeting. The other thing I'm highly critical of the school district is they notify some people of the meetings and not everyone. You get a letter if there's a meeting sometimes you don't. So it's very difficult for anybody to actually say they know everything because none of the meetings are actually made public to all individuals of the public. And that's a major complaint of mine.
Thank you.
Yeah, for reference, Justin, the meeting that took place at Merrill School, the city did the notice to make sure we could identify as many people as possible. In this instance, we went much larger than we typically do. We also sent it to the neighborhood organization so they could help distribute it to their membership as well. I'm not familiar with what other meeting may have taken place. That's the only one that the city had any involvement in.
Thanks. I just
and for the
that
city
meeting.
involvement in that,
Hold on
I
a second,
appreciate
Donald.
it.
That meeting in particular is something that I feel would have been, if I missed it in the report, I apologize. But that sort of reading, I think, is really valuable when there's a section on, a community meeting was hosted and the general sentiment was positive, is to I guess, receive better records that really allow us to make an informed decision as to what issues were raised, how are they being addressed, or what's the rationale for not addressing them. I just don't have any information on it.
Yeah, I believe Brian did reference it in his comments earlier. That some of these situations that came up during the meeting.
Yeah, that's what I mean, is it ends up being kind of a brief, like 1 or 2 sentences, as opposed to actually seeing records, similar to the previous discussion about sustainability board, actually seeing, what are those issues that they raised and what was the conversation that was had. I know you can't always do it, but it seems there are opportunities where we could be getting more information.
Yeah, the neighborhood meeting was not a meeting done by the city, which is why we have no minutes or anything from it. We just helped with the notice because we knew there were a lot of interested parties.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have anybody else from the public who would like to speak on this item at this time?
This is Donald Kelmerton. Can I make a comment to Mr. Mitchell?
I don't know, Mark, have we, I'm trying to
that would be the plan commission's discretion if they want to hear from him again.
Would I have to call a roll for that, or?
You can just, it looks generally like people are okay with it, so.
Okay, as long as you keep it brief, Mr. Callerton. Sure, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The response by the staff who prepared the notes for the meeting today are very, very short on the accuracy of how the local residents feel towards this project. You're looking at a project which encompasses 2 parcels of property in excess of $154 million. The facts which the school district that I'm aware of have referenced as justification for their actions have not been demonstrated, to my understanding, to be accurate. Look at the traffic patterns and the traffic counts. They referred to a traffic study. There was according to the traffic engineer who attended the meeting on Merrill Avenue, there was no study. He merely took, the traffic engineer merely took national averages and put it into his report for supplying to the school district. I think that's totally inaccurate. The lighting of the loading zone is inaccurate based on the heavy traffic on the Jackson side of the street. If you do lighting on the Nevada street, I believe it's justifiable to reduce the lighting on the rest of the building. Having said that, I still go back to a building of this size in this area, which is residential, should be set back at least 10 feet from the property lines per 10 feet or each story of construction. If anyone would like to have my comments, I am more than welcome to talk to somebody or explain these things. But so far, I have not been able to find anybody to honestly talk to. After the last meeting on Merrill School, and by the way, I want to say I was very, very disappointed about the meeting at Merrill School because the members of the city staff, members of the engineering staff, members of the school district all wore face masks, excuse me, did not take their face masks off to speak. Their speech was muffled on the microphones. Sometimes you could understand it, sometimes you couldn't. And there was no directory of who was at the meeting, who put on the meeting, and who you could contact. I spent 3 days trying to run down the people who were there to make comments or send letters to. And I'm sorry, but I just couldn't find anybody who could confirm anything. This is my attitude on how this has been put forward so far. There are more shadows than facts here. And until facts are brought forward, I firmly believe that the zoning board did not, and the planning commission here, should not approve this. There's nothing here in front of you which benefits the school district or benefits the city. Might in the future, but there's nothing there now. I believe right now, because of the cost, and everything else involved, it will actually do more harm to the city than benefit. And again, I am more than willing to talk or sit down and explain anything to anybody. And so far, I can't find anybody to do that too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anybody else from the public? Okay. Not seeing anyone, so I'll bring it back. So give the petitioner.
There's a hand up. So-
Yeah, that's applicant. We'll let him speak during the final comments.
Yep, I saw the hand up. I'm getting there to you. Okay, then at this point we will close the public hearing, and now I will ask for any closing statements from the applicant or their representatives who are here.
Thank you all for attending tonight and for the comments that have been voiced. I guess for all public that may be attending or maybe would hear this at a later point in time, any questions regarding the referendum, as mentioned at the neighborhood meeting, could be directed to Dr. Dave Gunlock. He's the deputy superintendent of the school district. I know he has fielded multiple phone calls and emails since the neighborhood meeting, so I would encourage any conversation to continue to go to Dr. Gunlock at the school district. And so with that, I guess I disagree that with some of the comments made earlier tonight, and that's okay. Disagreements are good, right? I appreciate other people raising their concern. I think the concern regarding the Merrill property is valid, but at the same point in time, I think that the school district has the best interest in the public and in the community as it regards to that site, and we'll look for further community engagement and involvement as it relates to the existing Merrill building and what that site will do. So with that, thank you for listening to everything tonight, and happy to ask any other questions. I guess I would maybe offer it up to Jim Fox, who is with us from Oshkosh Area School District, if he has any additional comments.
I appreciate that, Nate. Again, I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for the time that they gave us tonight. A couple of very quick comments. I just want to clarify one thing. An exhaustive traffic study was performed, as is necessary for a facility of this size. Moreover, a secondary traffic study was done to try to verify or validate a couple of additional unforeseen traffic patterns by the request of the traffic commission. So there were several meetings with regard to vehicle traffic drop off with regard to this facility. So again, I do appreciate the concern of the community and of the planning commission. I just want to assure you from Oshkosh Area School standpoint that all due time was given in studying how we are going to park buses, how we're going to utilize our parents, and how the students are going to traverse the streets in the community, and how they're going to park their bikes, and where our staff are going to park as well. Trying to get them off the street into the parking lots was a critical piece of this entire space. And again, to echo what Nate had said, the green space across the street is being evaluated, as was indicated as part of the referendum, the approved referendum last year. We're building on a site where the taxpayers approved us to build this particular middle school at approximately the size that we felt it would be, and we are constantly reviewing month to month what we can do across the street at the existing site of the middle school. So unless there are more questions, again, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the community's input and the time of the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now I'll come back to the commission. Look for a motion and a second, and then I'm sure we'll have plenty of discussion after that.
Am I able to ask questions for Mr. Fox?
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks. You noted that there were additional meetings and studies done, and I know that the report indicates that the traffic and parking advisory board discussed traffic analysis. Are those available anywhere? Is that something that I didn't see it on your website, and I certainly don't have that? Is that something that is made available to the public?
Justin, when we went through the traffic advisory board, that report was made available during that process. So I would assume that you would be able to grab it from the city's meeting minutes in that meeting.
Correct. I can track it down from traffic advisory for you, Justin.
And okay. I don't know if I'm alone in that, but I just feel like those sorts of things that, part of land use is how it impacts traffic patterns and whatnot. We often talk about, restricting entrance and exit and whatnot. And that would be another great thing to have included as we review this. It's a big decision, and to make sure that we're having all the information in front of us.
Yeah, just from a timing standpoint, the reason that went before this is they did want council to weigh in on the TIA and the flipping of the one-way pairs before site design got all the way to the point for documents being ready for Plan Commission. So that TIA, along with flipping the one-way pairs, kind of preceded the project, because obviously if council wasn't willing to approve that element of it, it would have substantially impacted the entire design. So that's why that element went through its approving body, through the traffic advisory board, and then ultimately council prior to the land use and the site plan side of things.
Sure. James, so you are a representative of the school district?
Yes.
Great. And I was hoping that you could just kind of definitively say that you, in your position and the school district's position, you understand that by moving forward on the proposal today in no way indicates or suggests the support for any sort of idea on the other land, meaning that what we do today doesn't give a go-ahead or has no impact on the use of any other lot that's not under consideration today, and therefore won't later come back and say, well, because you supported this, therefore we have to have that additional space as blank. that this is a standalone thing, and you understand that this is not impacting that.
You're referring to the existing site of the Merrill School, correct?
Correct.
So that is being treated as a completely separate project apart from this building. This building is a standalone project, as was pointed out. So we are looking strictly at this facility. The existing parcel that you're referring to, that is the existing Merrill Middle and Elementary School, will be evaluated again on a month-by-month basis. Ultimately, a design standard will be determined in the future, a date to which I do not have at this point, again, because it is on a constant evaluation as to what that will look like, but that will be a freestanding project a couple of years from now.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm guessing we're finished with that now, and again, come back to the commission for a motion in a second, and then open up discussion.
Motion to approve the findings and recommendations, to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Harry, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion from the commission? Justin, is your hand still up, or is that a new one?
That's a new one.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. I really appreciate the design that they put forth. I think this is a great project, and I think it's a great location. I have one kind of real holdup, and that is we as a body have looked at other developments. We looked at the music at the place across, I think, heading out of town there, and there was two neighbors that made concerns, and we said no because they couldn't address those concerns. I don't know what the neighbors' concerns are here because we don't have any information on that. I don't have available what's been brought up. I don't have any records of what's been done for community outreach, and that's usually a major thing in what we look at when we're having high impact development discussions. And I would love to see this body say, bring this back in 2 weeks, provide us the information that we can see what are the neighbors' concerns, and what's been done to either address them, or in cases where they can't be addressed, what's the rationale? And I feel like we don't have any of that.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Mr. Ford.
Thank you. I know that this is a hard one because some of the public comments and public outreach would have been done by the school district, as opposed to us. So I guess my question for city staff is, I mean, do you have offhand the outreach that has been done on this?
So obviously the school district did a number of meetings prior to the referendum. I don't have specific dates or meeting notes from those. During the planning process, the city was involved with helping them notice, and we sent representatives to the meeting at Merrill School. There was a number of neighbors. I don't remember exactly how many. Brian was there as well. Maybe a dozen to 20 maybe individuals. There were a number of comments, directly related to more of the referendum, not wanting the school. Outside of those comments, there were directly a lot of the primary focus of the discussion, from I remember, was the pickup and drop off, how that was going to take place within the residential neighborhood, impacts in the neighborhood, how that traffic pattern was going to be affected. There were various comments as related to bike racks and how those were going to function. And then there was discussion about the building design itself. That one was relatively polarizing. There were neighbors who were steadfast against the design of the building, and there were neighbors that thought it was a very good looking building. So in staff's opinion, and I'll only speak for staff, the applicant did work to address as many of those as they could prior to moving this project forward.
Thank you. And quick follow-up, because it came up in the questioning with the member of the public. There's no plans for another, there wouldn't need to be another vote on this, or referendum or anything involving this new school, right? That's not, and certainly nothing that we would have anything to do with at the city.
Yeah. To the best of my knowledge, the referendum was passed and approved for the construction of this school as well as this school on the other site, which I'm forgetting the name of the other site. But yeah, that referendum was passed and approved for financing and construction of the two schools.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Miss Davy, go ahead.
Thank you, John. I too have some concerns. Some of them are a little broader than just this particular item. I find it troubling that on both of the long-term public buildings that we're discussing tonight, we're sacrificing a lot of the landscaping points. And I understand why that's helpful not to have that around a school. But I don't want to see this become a trend. We have those landscaping points on there for a reason. And it's a significant amount of points between the two buildings. So I just wanted to mention that. Another thing that's really troubling me about, I guess, both places is that, and I know there's another school coming down the road too. So I would like to point this out. I doubt that it could be mitigated for this school, but when we build more parking spaces, we're encouraging people to drive more. We're not discouraging them from it. We're not encouraging them to use alternate transportation, bicycles, walking, buses. You know, there's other ways to get around. And I think that we need to really be very aware of how many parking places we build. You know, it costs like $7,000 or something to build one parking space. A lot more if it's underground, I've been told. But why don't we put some of that money into encouraging alternate ways for people to get there, teachers, faculty, as well as kids? It being a middle school here, they're certainly old enough that it can be walkable from a larger distance, which leads into my next concern. I do have concerns about the length of the Kentucky Street drop-off, and with the one-way street, the amount of traffic that may back up there. I worked at Traeger for about 15 years, from when it was first constructed on, and every year the traffic problem got worse. I know Meredith can speak to this too. More and more people felt it was necessary to transport their children, have any kind of, exercise getting there and back or anything. And when it's 20 below, I get that. But when it's all the time, we need to be working as a community on encouraging more not car transportation. And I don't see that we're doing that with either of these buildings or any of that. More specifically, my concern with Kentucky Street is, where are the cars that are turning onto it going to wait? When my kids were at Merrill for secondary school, for middle school, there were always long lines. I just got to where I parked at the end of the block around the corner to pick up my kids. And yes, I did pick up my kids because we're actually on a bus route and it was not a walkable path. But enough about me. That's why I have these concerns, though. I've seen this in action, and I would really like to see if there was, I'd like to see the studies, I guess, to show how that's going to work. And just one other comment, and this is just me, but it's not lost on me that if this building had more of a rectangular footprint, an area to build on, that it could then have setbacks that were greater because there'd be more space available. And I think that sometimes we tend to see just from our own viewpoint and kind of forget the overall view. So I just wanted to mention that too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Margie. And let's see, I see Mr. Ford with his hand up again.
Thank you. Sorry to keep chiming in. No, the point's well taken from Margie on the landscaping issue. And I guess my question for Mr. Lyons is that one of the conditions we're placing on this is that the final landscaping plan has to be reviewed and approved by the Department of Community Development. And related to that, within the report, it discusses the need to change some of the screens and some of the buffered landscaping. So presumably those recommendations that are in the report will be covered by that condition.
Correct. The conditions are there to address the additional yard landscaping. That is the one that is truly deficient. If you take the yard landscaping out of the equation, they meet most of them, or will have to address those other elements that aren't being met outside of a little bit of foundation. With the triple frontage building, foundation becomes a little tricky because the code says you need 50% on those street facing sides. You can't have 50% divided by 3 sides. So, some of those do make sense. But really, the staff looked at it in the perspective of the overall scheme of landscaping. And where this difference from the park building, yes, the table showed they were deficient, but they'll have to add all of those. So the park building will meet all point requirements. This one, we are recommending that there are some base standard modifications really specific to the yard, where we reduce it with just the volume of this building and the site and the way it lays out. Staff feels that it's appropriate with the higher architectural elements to off some of that with landscaping. As you know, staff generally doesn't support a lot for landscaping variances. We like to see as much of it achieving the goals as what we have. When you start to get into the 6,000 for 7,000 points of landscaping, there is a little bit of diminishing returns there. The staff believes that it is being significantly landscaped. It's not what we're recommending. They're doing no landscaping or something of that nature. But we do understand, there is maybe an opportunity that maybe there a little more landscaping could be done. But, almost 6,000 points of landscaping is a lot of landscaping points on a site.
I guess quick follow-up related to that, and it came up again from Margie, but the impervious surface. I mean, if there's any movement to take away a couple of those parking spots to help get closer to that requirement, I think that would go a long way to alleviating at least some of my concerns.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one where we have PTA and parent associations who are arguing that they want enough parking and they want more parking. So when they come to watch their kids' basketball game and whatnot, and then we have some of the city codes and our desire to look at sustainable practices that really butt heads and just trying to evaluate what is the best use. One thing, Traeger, and I appreciate the comments by Margie related to Traeger. I can't tell you how many times during discussions with staff and the school district, we brought up the issues related to Traeger and needing to avoid similar mistakes in the future. And I think the applicant took that really into heart when designing some of this site. There's a lot more bump outs to get cars out of travel lanes to help facilitate some of that waiting area for child pickup. But it was significantly discussed as making sure we don't repeat the issues that Traeger had.
Okay, it looks like next up will be Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a property owner in an adjacent area next to this school, I think that the parking lot is probably not big enough on a Monday through Friday during school hours and even after school hours. I can't even park within 300 feet of my property because of the street parking by all the staff, employees, and others. So I have no problem with the parking whatsoever. I also want to remind this board that we're not here to discuss the merits of what the school district did or didn't do to get to this point. There was a referendum passed. We're here to discuss the project that is in front of us right now. And I think we've spent far too much time discussing what could or couldn't have been or what did or didn't do. We have a project in front of us, and this is our duty right here. I'm to the point where I appreciate everybody's comments. I'm willing to listen to other comments, but I'm very close to calling the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Ms. Sherryman, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking my comments because mine are just a little bit different. So when we saw the plan, I think it was the design plan maybe 2 to 6 weeks ago, right? There were suggestions made at the time about making the sidewalks not so square, kind of going through it to encourage some of that walkability that Margie's talking about. Will we ever see that again? Or I know we made those comments and I believe the architect said, you know, it's a good idea and he would take it into consideration. Do we ever see that again? Does that come before us? I have 3 questions, by the way. That's the first one.
Yeah, so the site layout does include this sidewalk configuration. I don't believe they chose to make any alterations based on what was shown at the Plan Commission at that workshop.
Okay. My second question is, will this come back before us? I mean, are there more, like I was a little prickly during that about some of the things, and then now there's a couple of things that are, you know, I'm like, you know, maybe not. Will we have a chance to see, I mean, is there going to be more things that are going to be brought before us again with this plan, or is this it?
This, unless Plan Commission chose to table it for additional discussion, or council chose to refer it back, if this would go forward and council would make a final determination at their meetings, it would not come back to Plan Commission.
Okay. And my last question is there any harm in, I'm not suggesting it, but I want to be cognizant of Justin's comment. Is there any harm in delaying it 2 weeks so members of this commission can get all of, you know, the reading done to feel more confident making a decision on this? Is this time sensitive?
So the zone change takes 2 readings in front of council. The first, which would be November 23rd. The second would be December 14th. So from a statutory requirement, which is the one that I pay attention to the most, delaying just the plan development portion of it, no. Delaying the zone change portion of it, we would need to get done today, but ultimately we could move the zone change portion of it forward separate from the plan development, and the final decision date would all still end up at December 14th.
Okay, that's it for now. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. I didn't realize it. Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm with Tom Perry. I've heard enough. I think we had an excellent workshop on this project, and nothing's perfect. And I recognize that this tall building, this big building, is an intrusion into the neighborhood in a way. But I did note that the current mayoral building is 3 stories. So I don't think that delaying it will help us any. I think we won't come up with any different conclusions than we have now. So I suggest we vote.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Anyone else have any? Okay. Justin.
Well, I'd like to give it a try because I guess I care to hear what the neighbors have to say. We do on a lot of other projects. I don't know why this would be different. So I'd like to put forth the motion, and I may struggle with this, Mark, but
So we have a motion on the floor right now we would need to address. Unless you're attempting to amend the motion, we can't make a new motion.
So to table it at this point, you're saying isn't the proper protocol, or to separate the 2 out, which would be an amendment?
So we presently have a motion on the floor to approve that we need to handle. You can amend that motion, but you cannot make a separate motion from it. So we would need to take the first motion up, or if whoever made the motion wants to withdraw it, they could, and we could take up a separate motion. But we do have a motion on the floor that must be addressed first.
So if I amend it to say to pull out the overlay from the zone change, that's something that is an amendment and is doable at this juncture.
Yes, you could make a motion to amend for the zone change only.
Okay, I do that.
And if we want to vote on that, someone would have to second it.
Davey, second.
Okay, now we would take a vote on the motion to send the zone change only.
Is this where I come in?
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Coulibaly.
I believe Mr. Coulibaly had to leave.
Okay, just kidding. Miss Davy.
Aye.
Councilmember Ford,
No.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Perry,
No.
Ms. Shireman,
Aye.
Ms. Prop,
No.
Chairperson Hens.
No.
All
So
right,
motion fails. So there is no amendment. Looks like Mr. Perry has his hand up.
No. Okay, Mr. Perry.
Let's call the original question, please. Thank you.
Okay, are there any objections? Do I have to ask?
I do not see any.
Do not see any. Let's call the roll.
Miss Davy,
Aye.
Councilmember Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Perry,
Aye.
Ms. Shireman,
Aye.
Ms. Prop,
Aye.
Chairperson Hens.
Aye.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, and I see nothing else on the agenda. Mark, do you have anything else for us?
I do not.
So I will accept.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Kathy.
Did we not get a notice that the 2nd December meeting was canceled? Or am I hallucinating?
2nd December meeting of council was canceled.
Oh, of council. Okay, but not the plan commission.
Plan commission, we usually wait to see what filings come in for that meeting. If there are time sensitive, we do have state statute requirements for things like zone changes, conditional use permits that have to be met. If we don't get anything in that is time sensitive and they can delay until January, we'll potentially recommend canceling that meeting. But we do want to stay on our statutory requirements if those come in.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Mark, if I could speak to that, is that okay? I know what Kathy's talking about. We did receive 2 notices that were sent in error by somebody in the office. And when I went in and questioned that, because I happened to be in the building, I was told that they were not intended to go out. So it was for both the first meeting in December and the first one in January. And I believe that I understood that neither of those should have gone out, and then they were fixed on the calendar.
Oh, yeah, those were just calendar invites that staff is getting ready to update the calendar invites for next year. So my apologies on that. Yeah, those were not the official meeting notices or anything, just calendar invites to help plan commission members with keeping track of things on their calendars.
Okay, I'll accept a motion in a second for adjournment.
Perry, move adjournment.
Shireman second.
I guess we have to call the roll.
Miss Davy,
Aye.
Councilmember Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Perry,
Aye.
Ms. Shireman,
Aye.
Ms. Prop,
Aye.
Chairperson Hens.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Good
Thank
luck,
you.
John.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.